If you consider that we are now digging up 400 million-year-old oil, turning it into a plastic bag, and then we use it for a minute or two, and then we discard it. Dinosaurs died out about 70 million years ago. So that is younger than most of the fossil fuels.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Confident podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Christopher. Christopher, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Christopher Carrick, founder of Lignin Industries. Spent way too many hours in the lab, and then out of a coincidence, I happened to run into this innovation, and here I am, CTO today, still part of the company. Well, an entrepreneur, I would say I could introduce myself as.
Okay, super. And you said Lignin Industries, right? That's a company that was founded by yourself. You're now CTO to create bioplastics. Is that right?
Correct.
What was your journey into that?
I've been, as I said, spent a lot of hours in the lab, and then at some point I started to focus on biomass, and I love the fact that biomass, it grows and it's a natural resource. And then back in my home, in my kitchen, I was basically exploring stuff that I was typically not doing at the lab when doing a PhD. So I happened to found a large interest in lignin, which is the brown part in wood that is basically discarded when making white paper from brown wood, or turning it into ethanol, or wood or biomass into ethanol. And then you have these leftovers, which is the lignin. So it's always been very tricky to work with because it's quite undefined and hard. So I spent some hours back in the kitchen where I lived. I played around with it, and I realized that I could change the lignin structure in a way that it became thermoplastic. So you could melt it and form it and do cool stuff with it. And then I was dad at that point, so me and my son we were very into Star Wars.
Right.
So I bought these Star Wars ice cube makers, so in the form of Chewbacca, and you could make ice out of those. But instead of making ice, I was doing this modified lignin that was thermoplastic. So I put them in the oven, I increased the temperature, and then I was starting to do ice cube trays, but not ice, but out of lignin, or this modified lignin, and out came this perfect Obi-Wan Kenobi or Chewbacca, which was my obvious favorite because he's brown and lignin is brown. And I showed this to a friend of mine that was also into materials and so forth. And he said that this is truly an innovation to do this, and you should start a company on this. And I said, no, I'm not so into that. I have plenty of other stuff to do. But then that little question sat to me, and about half a year later, the company was founded, and we realized that we could work with this modified lignin and blend it into normal plastics, and to make that plastic partially better, or taking several steps ahead of cutting the dependence on fossil fuels. So on that journey it started. That's the history of my history and of lignin. But the force of doing this, I've always been very into industries and different industries, and there are very big differences between the fossil heavy or the refinery oil type of industry, and then we have the forest industry, which is water based, and a complete different mentality of running those. And I've been very curious about the differences between these two industries. And what I do love about the fossil industry or the refinery industry is that they truly respect the raw material. So almost every molecule that goes into that refinery turns out to be a product in one way or the other. It could be gasoline for fuels or purposes, or it could be asphalt for road, it could be plastics for plastics. The main problem with that industry is obviously they take fossil oil. However, the biomass industry and the pulp and paper industry, where I come from, they are extremely good in utilizing biomass and turning that into paper or other viscose or textiles or whatever. But the main challenge with that industry is that it's only utilizing maybe half of the tree while burning the rest of it. So they are not really paying the respect to the raw material in the same fashion as raw oil and refinery business. And the most things that we burn in the biomass industry is the lignin. So taking what is good from the oil and gas type of industry and trying to have the same idea and thinking about the biomass and forest industry is what I'm trying to do. So basically utilizing that tree, stop it from being burnt to turn it into product that can be sold. So that's one of the main driving forces why I picked to zoom in on lignin.
Okay, great. And talk to me about the process. You get this lignin, and how do you turn it into bioplastic?
So we get this lignin as it is, as a fine powder, brown powder. It looks like chocolate powder that you make hot chocolates from. We take this, we heat it up together with a bio oil. So we modify it by attaching a bio oil onto the polymeric structure of lignin. And what happens is a couple of things. First thing is that this polymer becomes more hydrophobic, which means more oily as a chemical character. Second thing that happens is that the lignin goes from being a powder that almost cannot be melted into a material that can be melted and shaped and formed the way you want. So basically acting or as a thermoplastic. The third thing that happens, which we've realized lately, it's quite important, and that is it stabilizes the polymer in terms of thermal degradation. So biomass typically burn by itself at 180, 190, 200 degrees Celsius. And we prevent that, or we prolong that, we push that to maybe 240, 250 degrees Celsius before it burns. Super important when working with other plastics because they are typically processed at 200 degrees Celsius. So enable our material to work in an infrastructure, a plastic infrastructure. So this is what we do. The technology, what it enables our technology is to take this lignin that is more oily, and it actually mixes quite well with some of the plastics that we as consumer use every day. So we can mix in up to 40% of this modified lignin in polyethylene, polypropylene, or in ABS, which are some standard plastics. Polyethylene is used for bags and packaging materials. PP is, I believe, the most common plastic you have in your home. So a lot of home devices, home kitchen stuff, and a lot of packaging as well. And then we have ABS, which is in the Lego is ABS. A lot of things in automotive is ABS. Most of your electronic parts is made out of ABS. So we make these plastics partly better. It is what we're trying to do.
Okay, so this isn't a complete plastic substitute. What it is it's an ingredient that can go into plastics that reduces their reliance on fossil fuels, correct?
Correct. And it's not a small part. One can consider 40% that, it's not that good. I would say 40% is very, very high. We started out with maybe 10, 15%. And as we develop and continue our work, we are now up to 40% in PP. We still at maybe 20, 25 in ABS, still preserving the mechanical properties, obviously. And we aim to gradually increase this incrementally over time, but replacing 40% of what you typically, or 30 or 20, or what you typically use, it's huge. It's so big. So today, if we look at the market of plastics as such. It's less than or about 1% of the entire flow of plastics are bioplastics.
Right.
Only 9% of the plastics are recycled plastics on a global level. So being able to replace 20, 30, perhaps 40% of some of the items is huge. And it's also, there are several benefits we can, I don't know if you want me
Yeah,
to continue.
that was actually going to be my next question. What are the advantages of using bioplastic versus fossil fuels then?
So first of all, if we compare the two different feedstock materials, so fossil fuels, and sometimes I go to the philosophical way when thinking about stuff, but fossil fuel, if you double click on fossil, what is fossil? Fossil for me is something very old. And if you consider that we are now digging up 400 million year old oil, turning it into a plastic bag, and then we use it for a minute or two, and then we discard it. Dinosaurs died out about 70 million years ago. So that is younger than most of the fossil fuels, just to put context on it. And that's the main drawback of fossil. It's not really growing. It's not really, it will be depleted since every gram or kilo of fossil stuff we use, we need to wait another 400 million years until it's reproduced. While biomass, it's 1 year to 30 years. But the benefits, going back to the original question, which was why do we mix in 40%? I think it's also when we're working with the plastic industry and brand owners, it's also a safety point we've realized that if we can go to a customer and say, okay, you can mix in up to 40%, you still have the 60% that you know how it behaves, you know exactly how to process it, how to operate it, how to shape it, form it, and how it feels, etc. And then everyone is afraid when changing from something to something new. And then we can always say, well, if you're super afraid, well, the risks you want to take, it's up to you. We can mix in 5%, that is still, much better than zero. But we can take incremental steps, making it more easy and appealing for a customer to take the steps and perhaps link them to the KPIs that you have in your company. Why do they want to do this? Main thing is CO2 reduction, so carbon dioxide. If that is important to you, our material is one of the least CO2 consume. We're taking waste that is made from biomass that grows. We're putting it into something that is a plastic. So we decrease the CO2 dependence on these materials, Scope 3 type of challenges, quite heavily, a much more heavy or higher impact if you replace it with our material compared to a recycled plastics, for instance.
Walk me through that. Why that difference?
So recycled plastics is still fossil. So the material is still, coming from, it's a good thing to do. I love recycled plastics. Since it's still made from fossil, it cannot be renewed. And the recycled plastics, if we're going into the data of it, has about 0.7 kilograms of CO2 per kilograms of material. So that is the number to beat for us. So since biomass is growing at the expense of atmospheric carbon dioxide, since photosynthesis, the trees grow by absorbing CO2 from the air, and together with water and some sunlight, it converts, it absorbs, it sucks out this CO2 when biomass is grown. So that means that for every kilo that we use that is not burnt and released back to the atmosphere, we bind this carbon dioxide, creating a net zero, a negative carbon footprint material as the base material for us. So ours is about, when we do formulations that we then sell to the plastic industry, they are negative carbon, like 1 kilo of our material is minus 0.5 kilograms, or depending on the formulation, per kilo that we put in. So much more potent than a recycled plastic.
Okay. And for the plastic manufacturers, can they take, for example, 20, 30, 40% of your lignin and combine it with then recycled plastic to be even more carbon negative, or would that work?
Yes. So today we have a couple of customers that have 0% virgin plastics. So what they do is they take 20, 30%, as you say, of our material and mix that with the rest is recycled materials. If you do this carefully and you pick the right recycling grade, you end up with a material that is net zero, so 0 kilograms per kilo until it's burnt. If you burn it, then you release some of the CO2 again, of course. But
Sure.
those materials are really, really interesting from a scientific, perhaps from a marketing story. Some of the brands we work with want that material because it's what we aim and strive for 2050 type of targets. Most of the companies does not want this because it's slightly more expensive and they don't really know whether the market's going to appreciate that or not. Some of the brands doesn't care about the market. It's just this is our DNA and what we have to do. So that's why we do it. It doesn't matter if the market wants it or not. And those brands we love, obviously. Most of the customers that we work with just want to do a stepwise approach.
Right.
And then we use less of our material, perhaps a little bit more of the virgin type of materials, and yes or no to the recycling grades. We have a lot of different formulations, and it's different in almost every case.
Mm.
But yeah, so it depends. But we do love what we always go to a customer is our preferred choice, which is no virgin material and only recycled plastics together with our plastics. And to us, it's quite interesting as well. Our material, it behaves better when we're working with recycling grades rather than virgin grades. I don't know really why, so we're doubling down on that. So material property wise, it could be actually better with recycling grades rather than virgin grades. And maybe we're lucky when picking the recycling grade, or perhaps there are something else.
And better in what aspect?
Mechanical properties. So we always want to give a formulation, a material to a company. They have certain specs on these materials. They need to withstand UV, or a speaker has to be dropped from a certain height, still being functional and not destroyed. So we always try to make the choice as easy as possible for a customer. So preserving mechanical properties, I think, is key. It doesn't matter what the price is unless you deliver on the properties and the functions you want to have. And then, so those things is what I typically mean.
So, Christopher, the bioplastic you have, I mean, you can take in recycled plastic to help make it, but what happens at end of useful life of this bioplastic? Is it then itself recyclable?
Yeah, so this is something we have really looked into. One of the first hurdles or challenges that is important today within the plastic industry is being recycled. So it's a lot of regulations that are also coming in, and this is important. We have double clicked and zoomed in the recycling story of our material. So what we have done is that we have looked at the existing recycling infrastructure and how it's done with these three different materials that I've mentioned. And it's different in Sweden, it's different in Germany, it's different in US. There's differences everywhere. But the
Sure.
general things that the material goes through is first a sorting. You need to identify it as polyethylene, polypropylene, or ABS. That is done through a near infrared type of scanner. And what happens with our material when it's mixed in with the plastics is that up to 60% of our material, so beyond the formulations we do, then the material is still identified as the carrier polymer. So we're good to go in that step. And the next step in sorting is sink and float. So you measure density. So If you have polyethylene or polypropylene, you would like it to float and have a density less than 1. This is also achieved in the formulation if we have less than 30% of our material.
Right.
So now I'm talking about the open recycling, when we're throwing things in the municipality type of sorting plastics. So those two are both ticked off from a sorting point of view. And here comes the challenge, which is the recompounding step. So you melt the plastic down into a shape and form of a pellet, and then you incorporate that into the plastic industry. So that is done today at 210, 220 degrees Celsius. Coming back to why the three things that was important that we realized lately, and that is the increased thermal stability of our material. As long as you're below 240 degrees Celsius with our, and you are in that, you're 200, 210, perhaps 220 degrees Celsius in a recycling infrastructure. So we're still preserving, we're still not burning this raw material, so it still melts and can be pelletized. So we are playing with the recycling story. We want to have this material as long lasting and as circulating as many times as possible. The good thing, so we're actually adding a little feature to the recycling infrastructure as well. So lignin is filled with, it's called aromatics, phenolics. Phenolics are typically added in the recycling streams. Why? Because it's an antioxidant. The function of an antioxidant is to protect the virgin fossil plastics to not thermally degrade.
Sure.
So when we're putting in 15, 20% of our material, we're loading a lot of antioxidants in this material. So we're preserving the material. So every time you recycle a fossil plastic, it degrades every time. So what happens is that when we're turbo boosted the material with antioxidants, we can recycle. We've done 12 loops without losing properties, and that's much, much better. So 4 loops for a neat PE, and then it will be destroyed. Theoretically, these materials can be recycled many, many more times before you need to incinerate the plastics out of lack of performance. So those things are key. And then, of course, the fourth thing is that the material needs to be mechanically acting on a good level. And here again, we are putting materials that behave exactly as polyethylene would do, or how a brand owner would like a bag to function. So we are fulfilling all these boxes. But then obviously in the plastic industry, you don't really want the recycling grades, needs to be a color, and a lot of specifications today when buying recycled plastics is it needs to be 99% polyethylene, and it's such a large stream, so it will be diluted. But again, we are recyclable, and we have really looked into this. And I think this is a different story. This is the challenge for many other bioplastics. So they degrade at 200 degrees Celsius, and once you recompound it, you completely destroy these materials because you burn it. That's where we are in recycling.
And what kind of additional price are you adding on to, I don't know, a kilo of plastic, or however you measure the cost of plastic?
Yeah, it depends on the formulation, obviously, but what we are slightly more expensive. So in the 3 different fields that we are targeting at the moment, which is polyethylene, polypropylene, and ABS. Polyethylene and polypropylene are the cheapest plastics materials there are. We're obviously more expensive than the cheapest bulk polymers. Here we are about maybe 60-70% more expensive, but then again, you dilute it. So if you compare kilo to kilo, so if you use 10% or 20 or 30%, price is diluted obviously as well. Sure. If you compare the polymer to polymer. So ABS, on the other hand, we are almost on price parity with virgin ABS. So virgin ABS, it also is different from grade to grade and country to country, but it's about 2.4, 2.5 euros a kilo. And we're almost on the same level. So again, making it easy for the customer. giving it for almost the same price, same performance. So what we actually add is the color. So the neat thing about what we do is that the plastics, we all have a sense and a feeling about plastics. What we actually provide is a touch of trees in smell wise. So you get a perception and you get a feeling, an instant feeling when getting a bag or a speaker with our material. You instantly get a woody touch and a woody smell from that speaker. However, it's plastic. So it's a little bit of a mind fuck, but I love the touch and this is a design feature that goes beyond shape and form and color. It goes to the scent as well.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, these plastic materials tells you a story that this is a biomass and it's a plastic and it's a really eco feeling to it. This has been the key attribute for when we're doing e-commerce bags. So the type of bags you get when buying something online and it comes wrapped up in a plastic bag. And that bag has a small scent of forest or sauna or a woody or forest type of smell. And we're getting this several times now that your biggest add-on, your most important USP
Mm-hmm.
is your smell and your touch, and you can instantly like the material since it tells a different story. And I think this is also, yes, I want to double down on this. Stop me if I'm talking too much about this.
Go on.
But when I'm sad, it's that the plastic industry is slow and it's very risk avert. I had Katie at university in Sweden visiting me 2 weeks ago, and all these individuals as consumers, they instantly love the type of bags and the smell and the story it tells. This is going back to a wood shop or getting a feeling to a bag. And that really, that is one of the key things that gets me going. The feedback I get from you, like us as people, and getting a
Mm.
bag in our hand rather than and then I realized that we're on to something. This needs to be a successful story. It will be more and more people will. Well, if the customer truly likes it, perhaps the industry needs to adapt and give this to. Perhaps there is a market for it, and I'm quite
Yeah.
sure it is. But that is what gives me energy.
Talk to me about the scalability. I mean, part of the issue you mentioned about the price, particularly with the PP and the cheaper versions, you had said there's about a 60% price differential.
Mm.
I'm assuming if you scale more, that price differential will decrease. You'll become more on par. Maybe I'm wrong, but usually as you scale things up, you get economies of scale and you get a learning curve, meaning your costs and your learnings reduce the price. So how scalable is it? And do you see yourself getting to price parity in time?
Good question. I always typically go to the where we are right now, our strategy and what we will do in the future. So yes, we will beat fossil prices as well. So already next year, we believe we will be cheaper than virgin ABS.
Okay.
So already next year in these higher grades. For PP and PE, so polyethylene and polypropylene, we believe we will be cheaper than those raw materials within 5 to 10 years. And that comes from economy of scale. So how do we scale? How do we solve this? So today, and it's two things that drives costs for us. The lignin price. So today is almost no one buying lignin. So there is basically no one supplying lignin. So economy and scale in that regard will decrease the price quite heavily. Today you're burning lignin. So the energy value of lignin is about zero point 0.1 or less than 0.1 euro a kilo.
Mhm.
Polypropylene was 1.4, so it's a 10-fold increase. So the raw material, we're competing against energy burning this stuff.
Right.
So raw material prices should go down. There is just, if we are on equal terms or slightly higher than energy value, we have decreased the price of raw material quite substantially. Second thing is the model, how we scale. So today we can produce about 2,000 tons in the facility we have close to Arlanda, Stockholm Airport. And that's very small in a 400 million tons plastic market. So how we do this modification on lignin in a typical plastic infrastructure called extruders. Two warm screws that are heating up materials and processing them, basically mixing the different components together. We use the same equipment when producing our stuff. So what this means is that we can go to the plastic industry, and instead of building up our own infrastructure for our production, we can rather go and rent or buy spare there is an overcapacity today in the plastic market, and we can go to these people and say, you know what, we can produce more with the already existing infrastructure, but instead of using this fossil feedstock, when you have time over, we buy this time and we produce our material. And when we are looking into this, we have about, there's a massive amount of volumes that can be produced almost overnight. And today we have a partner in Sweden and in France, a tool compounder it's called. So Lego producer for us, that can go from the 2,000 tons we have today up to 20, 30,000 tons with the already existing infrastructure, which means that we don't bind capital, we don't take risk in purchasing all this expensive stuff. We rather go and say, can we buy half of your time and produce what we need to produce, and you can continue producing the other stuff as you go. And that will also obviously optimize life for not just us, for the plastic industry as well, filling up their factories and process lines.
Okay, so you're looking at scaling not solely by producing this yourself, but also maybe by licensing or, as you said, partnering with already existing companies.
Yes, so partnering is our key. I think we still need to be the storyteller of our solution. We're not at the point where someone else can tell the story that we can and the formulations. So I think it's a buy-sell type of, so we buy time at an already existing infrastructure. We get the material back and we sell that to the market, and we develop that market. But today it's just a service for us, more or less. I believe over time, when this is more mature, a licensing model is, or maybe expanding to a different market, let's say Asia or US or Africa. We're focused today on Europe, but a copy paste, we use plastic bags in all corners of the world. So yeah. I guess, but we're not really at the point where we can license it because we need to tell the story.
Sure.
But soon, or maybe in 2-3 years from now, we might be at the point where we could.
And do you think we're moving fast enough on the material transition front, or is this just another slow motion climate delay?
I think on the tech side, I'm very optimistic. There are so many tech solutions, and not just us, that can provide this material that is as functional as the ones you've already or always used. Main problem is why change? So when we're working with the plastic industry, they know how to sell the plastics that they've sold for 20 years. They have not really considered that CO2 is a new property they should include in the offering. And they don't know how to sell CO2 reduction, is the general feeling I have. But the brand owners on the other side, they are a lot of brand owners and consumers such as us. We appreciate the small or the large steps we take. So that is, from a marketing point of view, driving a little bit of change. And why do they do this? I think they do this out of a belief, a heart story, rather than a regulated story. And that's the frustration. The frustration for me is that there is no reasons to change from fossil to anything better from a plastic point of view. There's no regulations in place. There are no drives. There are no bans. There are, very few. and that's the plastic industry. And why would we sell a slightly more expensive, or why would a plastic industry buy something slightly more expensive when they don't need to, they don't know how to sell it, and they don't need to do it, and it's more expensive. So it's all the bad things. However, some of the brands would like to do this, but they do it out of a heart, or this is good to do. And that's one observation. The other observation is that the second we force this transition, because again, there are solutions to the problem. All transition takes a lot of fight and a lot of energy to go through. Once we're there, we know that we can be as cost efficient as fossil plastics. We know that we can provide as functional material as is on the market. It's just a transition period that needs to have help and guidance, perhaps from regulatories or quotas, as in the aviation. Sustainable aviation fuel is happening a lot because of regulations, fuels as well, but not in plastics.
Right. Interesting. And seeing as you're mentioning brands, we've seen Barbies made from recycled plastic and IKEA embracing bioplastics. Which brand would be your dream partnership for scaling real impact?
I have always a dream, and that is, I love the brand Patagonia. We don't work with them, just
Right.
to mention that. So Patagonia is driven by a highly passionate and non-compromising type of idea about how the world should be. And so my dream brand to work with would be Patagonia, out of, the true belief in what the brand is all about. And for me, Patagonia is all about nature and sustainability, and taking responsibility of what we do. And so that
Yeah.
would be a brand dream, I would say.
Nice. Okay. And Christopher, what gives you the most hope right now in the materials and climate space?
Most hope. I think when looking at the people, I touched upon this earlier. So when I go to let's assume if I go to a brand owner and I show this bag and they can feel and touch it, the glow in the eyes of consumers, and consumers are also brand owners, like they're people. What gives me hope is people. When they see our material, they love the material and they love the story.
Great. Left field question, Christopher. If you could have any person or character, alive or dead, real or fictional, as a champion for bioplastic, who would it be and why?
Ooh, good question. A champion. I'm the chairman of the board. So we as a company is a young and innovative and rebellious company in some ways, creating a little bit of fun. And so we were thinking of including a board member that is perhaps an artist that is also good in telling stories and inspire other people. So who would the artist be if I'm looking at the world? That's a good story. So we were thinking about Swedish artists, but now I can think of Taylor Swift. Let's say Taylor Swift. I think she would be a good storyteller and a spokesperson for us.
Nice, nice.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Christopher. Is there any question I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to think about?
No, I think you touched upon the right stuff, the hope, and what should we do and what should we not do. I think the story is the important stuff in our stories is that. Yes, I think we're done. I think you did a very good job, Tom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And you too. Great. Super. Christopher, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Yes, so we have most of our activities, and please follow us and the steps we're taking. That would be in LinkedIn. So we have Lignin Industries. We have a LinkedIn page for we have a web page also, Lignin SE, so a Swedish web page. No, it's in English, but so web page, LinkedIn, I would say the main things. Please follow me or the company. We try to post interesting stuff most of the time. So that would be my recommendation.
Christopher, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.